I, 32F, never thought I'd be sharing this story, but I need some outside perspective. My relationship with my dad, Tom, 58M, has always been complicated, but recent events have left me questioning everything. To understand the current situation, I need to go back to the beginning. My parents met in college, my mom was studying literature, and my dad was the charming business major who swept her off her feet. They got married right after graduation, and I came along a few years later. From the outside, we looked like the perfect family, but there were always cracks beneath the surface. My earliest memories are a mix of happy family picnics and tense silent dinners. Dad worked long hours at his marketing firm, climbing the corporate ladder with single-minded focus. Mom stayed home with me, but I remember her often being sad or frustrated. It wasn't until I was older that I understood why. When I was 10, everything fell apart. I came home from school one day to find my mom crying in the kitchen. That's when I learned that my dad had been having an affair with his much younger secretary. The divorce was messy and painful. My mom was devastated, but she fought hard to make sure I had a stable home life. Dad moved out, but he made an effort to stay involved in my life. We had weekly dinner dates where he'd ask about school and my friends. He came to my soccer games and piano recitals. On the surface, it seemed like he was trying to be a good dad. But looking back, I realize how self-centered he often was. Our conversations always seemed to circle back to him, his work, his new apartment, his latest hobby. As I entered my teens, I started noticing a pattern. Dad always seemed to have a new girlfriend, and they were always young, usually in their late 20s or early 30s. At first, I didn't think much of it. Dad was handsome and charismatic, and I guess I thought it was normal for divorced men to date younger women. But then came Sarah. I was 15 when Dad introduced us. Sarah was 28, only 13 years older than me. She was nice enough, but it felt weird. She tried to bond with me over pop music and teen movies, but it just made me uncomfortable. I remember feeling relieved when they broke up after a few months. Throughout high school, there was a parade of young women in Dad's life. Some tried to befriend me, others ignored me. I started dreading our dinner dates, never knowing who might show up or how I was supposed to act around them. When I was 18 and heading off to college, Dad started dating Candace, 25F at the time. She was different from the others, more assertive, more interested in being part of Dad's life. And unlike the others, she stuck around. College was a relief in many ways. I was able to build my own life, make my own friends, without the constant presence of Dad and his girlfriends. But holidays and breaks were always tense. Candace had moved in with Dad, and suddenly my childhood home felt foreign to me. I remember one Thanksgiving break when I was 20. I came home to find that my room had been turned into a home gym. All my things, posters, books, childhood mementos, had been boxed up and moved to the attic. When I confronted Dad about it, he seemed genuinely confused about why I was upset. "But you're at college now," he said. "You don't need the room anymore." That was the first time I really saw how Dad's relationship with Candace was changing things. My presence in his life seemed to be shrinking, replaced by her wants and needs. After college, I moved back home temporarily while job hunting. That's when the real issues with Candace started. She treated me like an unwelcome guest, making comments about how long I was staying and how I needed to grow up and get my own place. Dad, to my shock and hurt, often agreed with her. One night, I overheard them talking about me. Candace was complaining about how I was cramping their style, saying they couldn't be themselves with me around. Dad's response broke my heart. "I know, babe," he said. "We'll figure out how to get her moved out soon." I confronted them the next day, and Dad tried to backpedal, saying I had misunderstood. But the damage was done. I moved out within a week, hurt and feeling betrayed. For the next few years, my relationship with Dad became increasingly strained. We'd see each other occasionally, but it was always with Candace hovering nearby. She'd make subtle digs about my appearance or my job, and Dad would just laugh it off or tell me to lighten up. I tried to talk to Dad about it several times, but he always dismissed my concerns. "That's just how Candace is," he'd say. "She doesn't mean anything by it." But it did mean something to me. It meant that my feelings didn't matter to him as much as keeping Candace happy. Things came to a head last month at my cousin's wedding. I brought my boyfriend, Jake, 34M, and we were having a good time until Candace had too much to drink. She started loudly comparing herself to the other women at the wedding, including me. She bragged about how she could still fit into her high school jeans and how some people, looking pointedly at me, let themselves go. I was furious, but I didn't want to cause a scene at the wedding. I pulled Dad aside and told him Candace's behavior was unacceptable. To my surprise, he defended her, saying she was just joking and I needed to lighten up. That's when I lost it. I told him I was done with both of them and their toxic behavior. Since then, Dad has been calling and texting nonstop, saying I'm overreacting and that family is more important than anything. But I don't feel like I'm part of his family anymore. Candace is his family now? I'm torn. Part of me wants to cut ties completely, but another part of me remembers the dad who used to take me fishing and help me with my homework. The dad who taught me to ride a bike and who cried at my high school graduation. I know that version of him still exists somewhere, but I don't know how to reach him anymore. Jake thinks I should give Dad one more chance, but set clear boundaries. My mom, when I talked to her about it, said she wasn't surprised. She told me that Dad had always been self-centered, always more concerned with his own happiness than anyone else's. I'm at a loss. I don't want to lose my dad, but I also don't want to keep subjecting myself to Candace's behavior and Dad's indifference to how it affects me. Am I overreacting? Should I try to mend things? Or is it time to accept that our relationship has changed for good? Update: when it's been a wild few months since my last post, and I want to thank everyone for their support and advice. Your comments gave me a lot to think about and helped me gain some much-needed perspective on the situation with my dad and Candace. After my last post, I decided to take a step back from both of them. I blocked their numbers and focused on my own life. Jake was incredibly supportive during this time, helping me work through my feelings and reminding me that I deserved better treatment. We spent a lot of evenings talking through my childhood memories, trying to untangle the good from the bad. About a month into my self-imposed silence, I received an unexpected call from my mom. She had heard about what happened at the wedding from my cousin and wanted to check in on me. We hadn't been super close since the divorce. I think I always reminded her a bit too much of Dad, but she invited me over for dinner. That dinner was eye-opening, to say the least. Over her famous lasagna, my childhood favorite, my mom opened up about her marriage to Dad in a way she never had before. She told me things I'd never known, how Dad had always had a wandering eye, even when they were first dating. How he'd make subtle comments about her appearance that chipped away at her self-esteem over the years. She shared a story from when I was about 5. Apparently, Dad had missed my kindergarten graduation because he was on a business trip with a coworker. Mom found out later that the trip was more pleasure than business. When she confronted him about it, he turned it around on her, accusing her of being paranoid and unsupportive of his career. Listening to my mom, I started to see patterns in Dad's behavior that I'd been blind to before. The way he always had to be the center of attention. How he'd charm people initially but then lose interest once he felt he had them under his spell. It was a pattern he'd repeated with his girlfriends, and, I realized with a pang, with me as well. I left that dinner with a mix of emotions. On one hand, I felt validated in my feelings. On the other, I felt a deep sadness for the years of manipulation I'd been blind to, and for the pain my mom had endured. A week after the dinner with my mom, my dad showed up at my apartment unannounced. Jake was there, and I'm glad he was because I'm not sure I could have handled it alone. Dad looked old. Tired. He said he'd been doing a lot of thinking since the wedding. He admitted that his relationship with Candace was toxic, not just for me but for him too. He said they'd been fighting a lot, especially since I cut contact. He apologized for everything, for letting Candace treat me badly, for not standing up for me, for making me feel like I wasn't important. He even apologized for things I hadn't even realized had hurt me, like missing my college graduation because Candace had planned a trip that weekend. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to forgive him on the spot, to fall into his arms like I did when I was a little girl and he'd come home from a business trip. But a bigger part remembered all the hurt and betrayal. I told him I needed time to think. It's been 2 weeks since that conversation, and I'm still processing everything. Jake thinks I should give Dad a chance, but set clear boundaries. He pointed out that Dad making the effort to come apologize in person was a big step. My mom, when I called her about it, was more cautious. She reminded me that Dad had always been good at saying the right things when he felt he was losing control of a situation. I'm still not sure what to do. The little girl in me wants her dad back, wants to believe that this time he really means it. But the woman I've become isn't sure she can trust him. I've been thinking about suggesting family therapy, but I'm not sure if that's the right move or if Dad would even agree to it. For now, I'm taking it one day at a time. I've unblocked Dad's number, but I haven't reached out. Part of me is waiting to see if he'll make the effort to keep in touch, to prove that he meant what he said. Another part is scared to let him back in, afraid of being hurt again. I've been focusing on strengthening my relationships with other family members. I've been calling my mom more often, and I've reconnected with some cousins I'd lost touch with over the years. It's been nice to remember that family is about more than just my dad. Jake and I have also been talking more seriously about our future. All of this drama with my dad has made me realize how important it is to have a partner who truly supports you. Jake has been my rock through all of this, and it's made me appreciate him even more. As for Candace, I haven't heard anything from or about her since that day Dad came to apologize. Part of me wonders if they're still together, but a bigger part of me is trying to focus on my own healing rather than worrying about their relationship. I'll keep you all updated as things develop. Again, thank you for your support. It means more than you know. Update 2. It's hard to believe it's been half a year since my last update. So much has happened, I hardly know where to start. First things first, my dad and Candace broke up. It happened about a month after my last update. Dad called me to tell me himself, which I appreciated. He said they'd been having problems for a while, and my cutting contact was a wake-up call for him. He realized he'd been prioritizing the wrong things and people in his life. After the breakup, Dad asked if we could meet for coffee. I agreed, but I asked Jake to come with me for support. The meeting was awkward, to say the least. Dad looked like he hadn't slept in days. He apologized again for everything and said he wanted to make things right between us. I was cautious, but I agreed to start small. We began with weekly phone calls, just catching up on our lives. No heavy topics, no rehashing the past. Just rebuilding a basic connection. It was strange at first, almost like talking to a stranger. But as the weeks went by, I started to see glimpses of the dad I remembered from my childhood. About 2 months ago, Dad asked if he could come to dinner at my place. I agreed, and to my surprise, he brought photo albums from when I was a kid. We spent hours going through them, laughing at old memories. There was a photo of us at the beach when I was about 6, building a massive sandcastle. Dad told me he remembered that day clearly, how proud I was when we finished it, and how devastated I was when the tide washed it away. He said he'd learned an important lesson that day about the impermanence of things, but he'd forgotten it somewhere along the way. That night, Dad opened up about his own childhood. I learned things I'd never known before. How his father, my grandfather, had been a harsh, critical man who never seemed satisfied with anything Dad did. How Dad had always felt like he had to prove himself, to be the best at everything. It didn't excuse his past behavior, but it helped me understand him better. But it hasn't all been smooth sailing. There have been moments when old patterns emerged. Once, he made a comment about how I should start thinking about having kids soon because I'm not getting any younger. It stung, reminding me of how he used to talk about women and age. I called him out on it immediately, and to his credit, he apologized and admitted it was a messed up thing to say. The biggest test came last month when Dad announced he was dating again. My heart sank when he said her name was Melissa and she was 38. Here we go again, I thought. But then he surprised me. He asked if Jake and I would like to meet her, saying he valued my opinion and wanted to make sure she would be a good fit in our lives. The dinner with Melissa was surprisingly pleasant. She's intelligent, has her own successful career as a pediatrician, and most importantly, she treated me with respect. She even pulled me aside at one point to say she knew about the history with Candace and assured me she had no intention of coming between Dad and me. I'm cautiously optimistic about the future of my relationship with Dad. It's not perfect, and I don't think it ever will be, but it's better than it has been in years. Jake thinks Dad is genuinely trying to change, and even my mom has noticed a difference in how he treats me. For now, I'm taking it one day at a time. I'm proud of the boundaries I've set and maintained, and I'm learning that it's okay to forgive but not forget. The hurt isn't gone, but it's fading, replaced by a new understanding of who my dad is, flaws and all. Update 3. It's been a year since my original post, and what a year it's been. I'm happy to report that things with my dad have continued to improve, though not without some bumps along the way. The biggest news is that Dad and Melissa got engaged last month. When he told me, I had mixed feelings. Part of me was happy for him, but another part was worried we'd fall back into old patterns. But Dad surprised me again. He asked me to help plan the engagement party, saying he wanted it to be a family affair. Working on the party together gave us a chance to talk more openly about the past. One night, over takeout and seating charts, Dad opened up about his marriage to my mom. He admitted to his mistakes, acknowledging how his actions had hurt both her and me. He talked about how he always felt inadequate, always chasing the next thing that he thought would make him happy. It was the most honest conversation we'd ever had. The engagement party itself was a small affair, just close family and friends. Seeing Dad with Melissa, I realized how different this relationship was from his past ones. They genuinely seemed to bring out the best in each other. Melissa made a point of including me in everything, even asking my opinion on wedding details. But the real test came when Candace showed up uninvited. She'd heard about the engagement through mutual friends and decided to crash the party. I saw her walk in and felt my stomach clench. But before I could react, Dad was there. He firmly but politely asked her to leave, saying this was a family event and she wasn't welcome. Seeing him stand up to her, Prioritizing our family over her dramatics meant more to me than I can express. After Candace left, Dad found me and apologized for the scene. We ended up sitting outside, talking for hours about everything: our relationship, his past mistakes, my fears for the future. For the first time, I felt like we were truly connecting as adults. These days, we have a standing Sunday brunch date, just the two of us. Sometimes we talk about serious things, sometimes we just joke around. Last week, Dad surprised me by bringing some old home movies he'd found in the attic. We spent the afternoon watching them, laughing at my terrible dance recitals and his questionable 90s fashion choices. It was a bittersweet reminder of the good times we'd had and how close we'd once been. Jake and I are talking about getting married ourselves, and Dad has been surprisingly supportive. He even offered to help Jake pick out a ring, saying he'd made enough mistakes in relationships to know what not to do. It's strange, but in a good way, to see Dad taking an interest in my relationship without trying to control it. Looking back on the past year, I'm amazed at how far we've come. The hurt isn't completely gone, and I don't think it ever will be. There are still moments when I catch myself waiting for the other shoe to drop, wondering if this is all too good to be true. But those moments are becoming less frequent. I've learned that people can change if they're willing to put in the work, and that it's never too late to rebuild a relationship. Dad's not perfect, he still sometimes says thoughtless things or falls into old habits, but he's trying. And for now, that's enough. To everyone who's followed my story and offered advice along the way, thank you. Your support helped me navigate one of the toughest periods of my life. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that family isn't just about blood, it's about the people who show up for you, who put in the effort to understand and support you. Sometimes that's the family you're born into, sometimes it's the family you choose, and sometimes, if you're lucky, it's both. I don't know what the future holds for me and Dad. I'm sure there will be more challenges ahead. But for now, I'm grateful for the progress we've made and hopeful for what's to come. Reader comments. Comment 1, wow, what a journey. I'm so happy things worked out for you and your dad. It's rare to see people actually change, but it sounds like your dad really put in the effort. Wishing you all the best. Comment 2, I've been following your story from the beginning, and I'm amazed at how mature you've been through all of this. You set boundaries, stood your ground, but also gave your dad a chance to make things right. That's not easy to do. Congrats on rebuilding your relationship. Comment 3, I'm sorry, but am I the only one who thinks that Dad got off too easy? He treated Op terribly for years, and now everything's forgiven because he's dating someone age appropriate? I hope Op stays cautious. Comment 4, this gives me hope for my own relationship with my dad. We've been estranged for years, but maybe it's time to reach out. Thank you for sharing your story. Comment 5, I'm glad things are better, but please don't forget how he treated you before. People can change, but it takes time and consistent effort. Keep those boundaries strong.